U.S. housing market is in a massive affordability crisis heading into 2026. In fact, this crisis is getting so bad that the Trump administration is on the verge of declaring a housing state of emergency. In this video, I'm going to tell you all what the Trump administration could be on the verge of doing and how it's going to impact home prices and housing costs over the next year. You can see that this is an idea that the Trump administration recently floated. They're considering declaring a national housing emergency this fall. And what would that look like? Well, the Trump administration is considering an emergency measure to address the housing affordability crisis that has left millions struggling to pay rent and priced out of home ownership, according to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He said, "We may declare a national housing emergency in the fall, and we're trying to figure out what we can do. What we don't want to do is step in the business of states, counties, and municipal governments." However, the Trump administration does now seem focused on wanting to lower housing costs. And why is that, everyone? It's because we are in the biggest housing bubble of all time. Inflation-adjusted home prices are almost double their long-term average. It's an even bigger bubble than 2006, and that's causing your cost to buy a home to skyrocket. Right now, Americans need to spend 39% of their gross income to afford mortgage payments, taxes, and insurance. You could see the only other times that's ever happened was the 2006 bubble and in 1981 when mortgage rates went to 18%. So we need more housing affordability, and prices have started to get cheaper in about half the US. However, they're not getting cheaper fast enough. The affordability isn't happening fast enough, and as a result, home buyer demand is still scraping at 30-year lows. So the Trump administration is now taking a look at this and seeing what they can do. And in this video, I'm actually going to talk about some of my suggestions for how I think the Trump administration should make housing more affordable. Because one of their most recent suggestions, everyone, was an interesting one here. Donald Trump, he actually went on Truth Social recently, and he kind of threatened home builders. Trump and his advisor, Bill Pulte, who's the head of the FHFA, fueled a $20 billion home builder rout last week. This is really interesting. I don't know if you guys saw this. Fueled a deeper sell-off in home building stocks. And what happened here, everyone? Well, a series of social media posts from the U.S. president and FHFA director put home builders in the crosshair. Basically, these posts were saying that, home builders should ramp up production. Trump, in fact, was alluding to home builders acting like OPEC. Trump says OPEC kept prices high by restricting production. He's saying that big home builders in the U.S. are now doing the same thing. Trump says that home builders are his friend. They're very important to the success of the country. However, they can get financing, and he says they have 2 million empty lots. So we're seeing the Trump administration actually take aim now at home builders potentially as part of their housing policy. Are we going to see that if they declare a national housing emergency? And what does a national housing emergency even look like, everyone? Well, the one thing we need to solve is the cost of buying a house. And there's two factors really to the cost of buying a house. There's the home price, and there's the mortgage rate. And the home prices, they're in the biggest bubble ever. We've never seen home prices this expensive in U.S. housing market history by any metric you look at. Whether you look at inflation, whether you look at income, whether you look at rent, all of these metrics that ground you in reality of where prices should be, they all say home prices are in a big bubble. Now, at the same time, mortgage rates right now are 6.3, 6.4%. They're above where they were 5 years ago. They're double where they were 5 years ago, which is making housing more expensive. However, mortgage rates are within the long-term average. So mortgage rates have gone up, and that's something that has made buying a house more expensive. But the key thing, everyone, and the key thing you got to focus on, and that the Trump administration should focus on, is home prices. Home prices are the problem. In particular, everyone, this is the issue. The home value to income ratio in the U.S. Take a look at this graph, and I'm actually going to kind of make my screen here a little smaller so you can see it. This is data that goes all the way back to 1967, and you could see from 1967 all the way to 1991, or 1999, the home value to income ratio in the US was 2.4 to 2.9, meaning you could buy a house for roughly 2.5 times your median income. Then something happened in the mid 2000s. We entered a big bubble, 2006, 4.3 home value to income ratio. We'd never seen it before. Then there was a big crash. Today, we're back even above that 2006 home value to income ratio. So for some of you out there who are like, you know, struggling with the idea like, are we in a bubble? Are home prices going to come down? Are they going to keep going back up? Remember this graph. The home value to income ratio is booming or has boomed towards a level that we have never seen before in US history. And this is how you know it's a bubble. This is how you know prices are the problem, is the fact that prices have gone up way more than incomes. This is really the fundamental issue. Prices have gone up way more than incomes. But folks, this isn't an evenly distributed housing market right now. We are seeing prices still go up in a lot of parts of America, but we're also seeing prices go down in a lot of parts of America. Here, data on Reventure App is showing that prices are going down all across the Southeast US. They're going down across Florida. They're going down across Texas. They're now even going down in Northern California. So we do have home price deflation occurring in roughly half the US right now. If we look at the different states, there's 15 states with year-over-year home price deflation, according to data from Zillow, which you can find on Reventure App. Additionally, we have about 25 states with month-over-month home price deflation. So we are starting to see the market turn down, as many of you know. I've been reporting to you guys on this channel in the last 2 years about that, but it's just not enough, right? We just haven't seen that happen enough, even in a market like Florida, everyone, which is down 5.1% in the last year. Yes, that's the biggest decline in Florida we've seen since 2011. However, if we look at the overall cost of buying a house in Florida, it's only starting to come down a little bit. So there's a lot of downside left. And I think the key thing that we got to do as a country with housing policy is just acknowledge this fact that prices are the issue. And prices need to come down. I think everyone needs to get comfortable with that idea and get comfortable with the idea that like this will be good. Lower prices is going to be good for America. It's going to be good for Americans. It's going to allow Americans to move. It's going to allow more first-time home buyers to enter the market. I mean, it's one of the lowest rates of first-time home buying that we've seen in the last 2 decades. It's going to allow more people to get into the market. So lower prices is good news. And I think a lot of people in the real estate industry need to kind of reframe that. People in the real estate industry, especially, if you're a member of the NAR, if you're a realtor, if you're a mortgage broker, it's been beaten into your head over the, last couple decades, ever since you started in real estate, that the market always goes up, that the market going up is a good thing. But folks, that is not the case anymore. Prices being where they are is actually destroying the housing market. It's crushing transaction volume. I mean, folks, the Fed just cut interest rates a month ago. Fed just cut interest rates a month ago, and they cut interest rates 4 times last year. We were told that these rate cuts were going to bring the buyers back into the market. Do you guys remember everyone saying that the rate cuts were going to bring the buyers back into the market? Well, has that happened? Have the buyers jumped back into the market? The answer is no, everyone. The buyers have not jumped back into the market. And this is, I think, another thing that's probably concerning the Trump administration. As we look at data on mortgage applications, and you can see the mortgage application index to buy a house, everyone. It's gone up a little bit over the last 12 months from the really low levels of 2023 and 2024, but mortgage demand is still about 34% below the peak. I should say below pre-pandemic norms. So we're 34% below pre-pandemic norms on mortgage demand. We're about 40 to 50% below the peak. So this is where we are. People applying for mortgages to buy a house. A little bit of a recovery in the last year, but nothing to write home about. And that recovery is kind of stalled over the last 6 months. So if people aren't applying for mortgages to buy a house, where are you going to see your recovery in housing demand? I mean, you're not going to see a recovery in housing demand with so few people applying for a mortgage to buy a house. And again, the way to unlock that is through lower prices. And to get lower prices, what do we need, everyone? To get lower prices, we need more inventory. And this is where I think the conversation gets interesting, right? Trump and Bill Pulte kind of were looking at the home builders last week, trying to push the home builders to build more. Maybe they're going to use some levers that they have at their disposal at Fannie Mae to try to incentivize the builders to build more. Maybe I'm just speculating here. Are they going to do like blanket construction loans for home builders to help them build more homes? That would be an interesting idea. Instead of the builder building a house with the end buyer having a Fannie Mae mortgage, is the government going to give bulk mortgages to home builders? I think that's something they should probably consider if they want to incentivize more construction. However, here's the point. The builders are already building a lot. Builder supply is near a record level, and in the South, builder inventory is actually above a record level. It's the highest we've ever seen in the South, builder inventory. So what we actually need to see, in addition to more builder inventory, is more existing sellers, more people who own homes already sell their homes. And the issue here is that we've had a lot of existing owners with sub, 4% mortgage rates, let's say, who haven't been in a rush to sell their homes, right? So how do we incentivize more of the existing owners to sell? And for me, this would be the crux of any type of housing state of emergency. Like if I were president and I declared a housing state of emergency, where I would focus my emergency powers is trying to shake loose inventory in the existing home market, particularly targeting investors. Because this is what a lot of people don't know, everyone. Investors own anywhere from 15 to 20 million homes on the U.S. housing market. 15 to 20 million homes owned by investors. And I believe that this is actually the key. This is actually the key to freeing up housing demand. Take a look at this, or freeing up housing supply. Take a look at this chart, everyone. We're looking at all the single family homes in America. According to the census, there's 99 million single unit structures in the US. 99 million single unit structures. Okay, what are these other bars? The orange bar shows the percentage of those structures that are investor owned. So 15.4% of the single unit structures in the US are investor owned. 15 million. That's a lot of homes that investors own. Okay, in addition, there's 3.8% of homes that are second homes. So 3.8% of homes are second homes. Now, 1.4% of all homes are currently listed for sale on the resale market. So 1.3 million homes are currently listed for sale. That's 1.4% of the entire housing stock. And then this builder inventory here is on the right. The builder inventory is 0.5% of all the homes. And so what is very clear, everyone, is when you look at this graph, what we need to focus on as a country, if we want to free up more inventory, get more affordability on the market, we got to target the investor-owned homes. Because the investor-owned homes, what is that? That's like 20, 30 times more than the builder homes. I think targeting the builders on the margin, okay, let's get the builders to build a bit more. But we got to find a way to shake loose more homes from these real estate investors. And rest assured, everyone, the investors have started to sell, especially the big Wall Street investors. They are out on the market. People still like to say BlackRock buying homes is a big deal. Folks, BlackRock hasn't been buying homes for like 2 years. In fact, BlackRock is selling homes. I was just in Georgia 2 months ago. I found a house that BlackRock was selling at 150, or I should say Blackstone was selling at $100,000 loss. The big Wall Street players, they are out on the housing market. They've been out on the housing market the last 2 years. Rather, the bigger issue is small mom and pop landlords. Small mom and pop landlords account for like 70 to 75% of all that investor ownership. So of the 15 million investor owned homes in the US, which if only 10% of them were listed for sale, inventory would double. Well, mom and pop landlords own 70% of those homes. So let's also get rid of this idea that it's the big Wall Street companies buying up all the homes. I mean, that's like a nice narrative that politicians like to spin. The bigger issue is smaller landlords buying up homes. And we need to find a way as a country to target those smaller landlords who own real estate and push them to sell. This would be at the kind of the base of my housing policy in 2026 if I were to declare a housing state of emergency. How can we get more landlords to sell, and how could we get 10% of all investors to sell their property? Well, I'm going to show you some points here, folks, that I've been working on with my housing plan, what I would do. I think this would be great for the housing market. I hope the Trump administration takes some of these ideas into consideration, because ultimately to see more inventory and to see more affordability, here's what we need to happen. Point by point. I want you guys to pay attention to this. You can let me know if you agree or disagree with these, but the first thing I'm doing, if I have emergency powers, in a housing state of emergency, I'm putting a tax on 1031 exchanges, which would reduce real estate investor purchasing. So for those of you that don't know, a 1031 exchange allows an investor to sell one house and then buy another house without having to pay capital gains tax. So say an investor bought one house 20 years ago and they've made $400,000 of appreciation. If they do a 1031 exchange, they can then buy another house and roll their gain into the new house without paying capital gains tax. We got to eliminate that for single unit structures, or we got to heavily disincentivize that through a transfer tax, which means that when an investor sells, they're not going to just buy a new house. They're actually going to sell a house onto the market. All right, number two, we need to reduce the depreciation expensibility of real estate investors. So a big reason why a lot of real estate investors own everyone is because it's a tax write-off. You can depreciate your structure on a 27-year depreciation schedule. So let me just actually write that here so you guys understand. So 27-year depreciation schedule. So if you have a structure that's maybe worth 300,000, you could depreciate that over 27 years. That can end up being like $3,000 a year write-off on your income taxes. So what I would do, I would try to like maybe double this depreciation to maybe 54 years. That would basically reduce the tax write-off that real estate investors get on their property and increase their burden for owning the property in terms of taxes. That would incentivize more to sell. Another thing I would do, I would set targets for home building in the single family space. So Trump, Pulte, they're focusing on the builders. Let's focus on it with like a specific goal. I would set a minimum. We need at least 1 million single family housing completions in 2026. Maybe they want to get more aggressive and say we want 1.25 million. But I would set like a defined goal for completions. And at least by setting a goal, we can actually work with some workarounds and policies. How would we do that? Would we give builders bulk mortgages to get financing to build? Would we, would the government take like stake in home builders? I'm not suggesting that that's a good idea, but the government is starting to take stake in companies that they think are critical for the nation and for the public. So I think there's different things they can do there, but it starts with setting a minimum on housing completions. I would also open up more federal land for building construction. Now, this is very specific to just certain parts of America, right? The federal land map in the US heavily concentrated in the Mountain West. So that'd be like Nevada, Utah, California. So this would kind of incentivize more building, open up more land. And then I would also increase federal funding tax breaks to states and cities that hit development quotas. One of the biggest issues we have in America is that a lot of NIMBY towns basically stop home building. They stop apartment construction. Let's try to incentivize them from the federal level to get more construction. This would be my 5-point plan, everyone. I think you got to focus both on investors and builders. We got to get more homes built. And we can do that through different ways. We also kind of pressure investors to sell. We need to increase their carrying cost. We need to increase investor carrying cost on owning real estate. And we should also give them an off-ramp to try to sell, maybe a temporary capital gains tax reduction if the investor sells to a primary owner occupant. So I just want to make that so clear. If anyone from the Trump administration or the government is watching, if you really want to improve housing affordability and increase inventory, you got to focus on investors and get investors to sell because they own a disproportionate share of the housing stock, and them owning all this housing stock, especially in urban areas, it's not really good for society. And let's get more of those investor homes in the hands of primary owners. Now, I know that was long-winded, everyone. Now you guys kind of know what I would do for the housing market. You can let me know what you would do for the housing market, but let's actually cover some more things here that the Trump administration is already doing, because they've actually been kind of low-key, pretty active in housing policy already. And this is kind of an interesting one that they did earlier this year. It didn't get a lot of attention. The Trump administration in March or April of this year, for the first time, they're saying no more FHA government-backed loans for non-permanent U.S. residents. So this was like a low-key, very big change to government mortgage policy. Prior to this, non-permanent residents in the U.S. were able to get FHA mortgages. So meaning if someone was here on an H-1B visa, they could buy a house, apply for a mortgage through the FHA program. That is no longer the case. So now non-permanent residents are no longer able to buy houses with FHA mortgages. So this is like something that the Trump administration did earlier this year. Another thing they're considering doing, according to ProPublica, they're saying millions could lose housing aid under an unpublished plan by the Trump administration, What they want to do, allegedly, this is according to ProPublica, the rules would pave the way for a host of restrictions long sought by conservatives, including limits on time living in public housing, work requirements for many people receiving federal housing assistance, and the stripping of aid from entire families if one member of the household is in the country illegally. So this has more to do with like the rental market, HUD, Section 8, rental stipends. What's the Trump administration wanting to do there? Clearly, they want to claw back how much federal rental assistance there is, and they want to put work requirements for people receiving federal assistance. I think that probably makes sense. Is this going to have a big impact on the housing market overall? Probably not. Another interesting thing that the Trump administration did recently, everyone, is it's actually for the first time in a long time, I don't know if this actually ever happened, rent payments are now part of, qualifying for a mortgage in your credit score. So the FHFA, headed by Bill Pulte, are now allowing rent payments to help Americans qualify for a mortgage. So Pulte, who oversees the primary U.S. housing regulator that oversees Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, says that credit history will no longer just include credit cards and loans. It's going to include rent payments. So this was actually a long-term thing that a lot of people on the Democrat side wanted. They said rent payments should be counted in credit scores. This is something that now Fannie Mae is doing. So the Trump administration has been pretty active already, but I think it's been stuff largely on the margins, right? I don't know if this stuff is really impacting housing affordability and cost in a big way. I think to do it in a big way, we got to target investors. We got to get more investors to sell. Now, folks, I know I've been going here, so I want to start to see some of your comments here. I know maybe some of you might have some interesting thoughts about what's going on here. Let's see. All right. We have a user saying none of this will stick, at least immediately. A judge will TRO all of this. What do you mean by all of this? So I guess one user is saying that some of these restrictions and rules by the Trump administration aren't actually going to stick. Let's see. The thing is, there is huge demand for houses. People want to own a place to live in. It's just that the prices are astronomical. What can the feds do to bring down house prices? So it's a good point. There are a lot of people who want to buy a house, right? But they can't afford it, So for instance, if you go on Zillow right now, and I'm just going to look in Nashville, where I live, and we just look, let's just pick some random houses. Like, how much are these houses? Are they within the realm of affordability, right? You could see here, this is actually a pretty nice area called Germantown in Nashville. You have houses for like $1 million. Let's go north of the river. You have some houses for a bit cheaper. Let's see here, $899,000. Yikes, this is expensive. 4-bed, 4-bath, 2,100 square feet, $899,000, $6,300 a month. How many people can actually afford a $6,300 a month mortgage payment? I don't know. This house has been on the market for 200 days, and this is always fun, everyone. When they try to rent it, it looks like they're trying to rent it while they're trying to sell it. This is always interesting. This is usually a sign that an investor owns the house when they're trying to rent it as well as sell it. Maybe not. Maybe in this case it was a primary owner, but the primary owner bought it for $916,000 in 2022. $916,000 in 2022. This was near the peak, everyone. Now they have it on the market for $899,000. So they've already cut it $17,000 from what they bought it for, but they're putting on the market for rent at the same time for $3,900 a month. And see, this is what doesn't make sense about the housing market, right? They have it on the market for rent at $3,900, but the cost to buy is $6,300. So we have a rental market in the US, which I'm not going to call it affordable. It's not affordable, but the rental market is at least much more in the realm of affordability for most people, yet the home prices and mortgage rates are making buying, in this case, 60-70% more expensive than renting. This house, based on the rent, should be priced more like $650 or $600 rather than $899. But tell that to someone who paid $916,000 for the house, before they get to $650,000, I mean, they might just not ever get there, right? And I think that's why it's important for the Trump administration to think about how can we push more investors to sell? How can we try to push more inventory on the market to make it less of a question of what does a seller want to sell for, and make it more of a question of all right, we got to sell. There's a lot of inventory in the market. Prices are going down. Rents are going down. Let's get out of the market and let's sell the house to a primary owner. Should be the attitude we're trying to kind of engineer and foster. All right, here's another home. This is a new construction from a builder. 3-bed, 3-bath, built in 2024. This is a cute looking new construction. Very big garage here in the front. I mean, it's pretty nice on the inside. I don't know what you guys think. So this is listed for $494, much cheaper than that other house. $3,200 a month if you buy it with a mortgage. So I don't know what you guys think about that. It was built in 2024. So has this been, yeah, so wow, folks, they've been cutting the price on this one. So it looks like the builder bought the land for $210,000 in 2024. The builder bought the land for $210,000. And then they built the house and listed it for $590 in November 2024. And they have since cut it from $590 to $490. So the builders cut the price $100,000 on this house and it's not selling. And I think this might show the issue with only targeting home builders, right? If we're only targeting builders in terms of trying to get them to build more, I think, we're ignoring a fact that the builders are already kind of struggling to sell homes. With where the cost of labor is and where the cost of materials is, a lot of the builders are constrained in their ability. I'm sure they could cut this house by more, but interestingly, they paid $210,000 for the land. That's what it looks like, and it's now listed for $499, which isn't very good. 210 divided by 494. Oh my gosh, that means that the land cost is 42% of their sale price. They might be in the red on this one. I'm not saying they are for sure, but they might be in the red. An interesting thing, folks, that I was actually looking at earlier was how the inventory from home builders compares to the resale market. And this is another key point. Like, what do we need on the housing market to bring prices down? We need more inventory, but where does the inventory need to come from? Well, it needs to come from resale inventory, existing inventory. There's 1.34 million single family homes on the market as of August 2025, according to the NAR. 1.34 million. Now you can see this is roughly double what it was the low during the pandemic, but we're only really back to we're not even quite back to pre-pandemic inventory on the resale market. So we still need more resale inventory nationally. I think we need to get to 2 million resale homes. If we get to 2 million resale homes, I think that would facilitate a big correction in prices, a good correction in prices actually, making homes more affordable. You can see meanwhile the builders are up to 490,000 homes for sale. But that's actually pretty high, 490,000 homes. That's close to a record. During the previous peak, they were at 572. So maybe there's a little room for the builders to squeeze out, 10,000, 30,000 more homes under construction, homes for sale. But the real progress has to come from resale inventory. That's where it needs to come from. And the other thing we need to think about, everyone, is that the resale inventory is not equal across the US. So if we look at our inventory surplus deficit graph on Reventure App, everyone, and this is a tool that you guys should use at the end of this video, go to www.reventure.app and access this data for yourself so you can take the knowledge of the housing market into your own hands and make more informed decisions. This data is looking at the inventory surplus or deficit by state. And this looks primarily at resale inventory. And you can see we just still have a big inventory deficit here in the Northeast and Midwest. We still have a shortage of homes for sale in the Northeast and Midwest. So these are markets where builders are just not very active at all. In the Northeast and Midwest, maybe the builders should start coming to these states because actually home values are going up still in the Northeast and Midwest while they're going down in the builder states. And there's an interesting correlation here, folks. Look at where prices are down over the last year in blue versus where prices are up in red. So prices up in red, down in blue. According to data on Reventure App, we source this data on home values from Zillow. Now I want you to compare this to the growth in housing units. Whoa, I just changed it to the growth in housing units. Can you see how it's inversely related? The states with the biggest growth in housing units over the last 5 years, in the Southeast, Texas, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, have prices declining over the last 12 months. Conversely, the states where housing unit growth is low in the Northeast and Midwest, prices are still going up. And, actually this is data that supports the notion that we need to, maybe pressure the builders to get more into these markets in the Midwest and Northeast. Except there's a problem, everyone. A lot of housing and building and zoning is local, right? And one of the reasons the builders have just completely abandoned a lot of the Midwest and Northeast is because it's impossible to build in these areas. Like I know just like a local builder in New Jersey, a small builder, and he was telling me that the amount of it's almost kind of like the mob. It's almost kind of like the mafia trying to like get a house permitted in New Jersey. Like you got to know the local people on the zoning board. He didn't say you got to pay him off, but it almost sounded like it. It almost sounded like, in a state like New Jersey, they're just not going to approve anything unless like you do everything correct, dot all your I's, cross all your T's, and have the right ins with the people on the planning board, and then just maybe, you might be able to build a house, right? That's how New Jersey is. Now Texas has like no zoning in many parts of the state, and you could just build, and you could build something really quick in like 4 to 6 months. Texas makes it really easy to build. New Jersey and other states in the Northeast and a lot of them in the Midwest, they make it much harder to build. So I do think there's a legitimate aspect maybe to a national, housing emergency that should involve trying to maybe make the zoning more open, right? And so Realtor.com actually had an interesting article about how a national housing emergency could open more doors for first-time home buyers. So Realtor.com is arguing that first-time home buyers have all but disappeared, accounting for just 24% of sales in 2024, according to the NAR. That's a historic low. So folks, first-time buyers were just 24% of sales in 2024. This is a big problem. This is why we're in a housing crisis. We have a crisis here in America. It's why President Trump is now vowing to step in. According to Trump, he's saying under the Trump administration, we believe that affordable home ownership is a fundamental part of the American dream, and we're working every day to make that dream a reality for millions and millions of Americans, he said in video remarks. Now, they've been pretty light on specifics, the Trump administration, as far as this goes. I showed you some of the kind of the more at the margins, some of their policies. But Realtor.com has some interesting history. They actually said that it's not unprecedented to declare a national housing emergency. It's been done before. It happened 80 years ago after World War II. Harry Truman invoked it after there was a severe shortage with all the GIs coming back after World War II. There wasn't enough housing. And during the war, civilian home building had been halted to prioritize defense needs. So clearly it was a different situation, right? We were at war. There was no home building really during the war, and then all the people came back from the war, so there was a big shortage. When veterans returned, demand far outstripped supply. Truman issued the emergency declaration and the special powers associated with it to accelerate construction, expand rental assistance, and even fund research into new building methods to relieve the crisis. But it's unclear which powers Trump might tap to address the crisis today and how the action could be received. But Realtor.com went on to speculate some things they could do. One is free up federal land for housing. I just talked to you guys about this a couple of minutes ago. That would be part of my plan. There's a lot of federal-owned land. The American Enterprise Institute has proposed auctioning off 850 square miles of BLM, Bureau of Land Management land, even though they estimate to build 3 million homes. 850 square miles. If we auction off 850 square miles, we could build 3 million homes. Sounds like maybe a good idea. I mean, obviously, I like our national parks and all that, but could we take some of that land in Nevada and Utah and California and Idaho and Colorado and build some more inventory? Probably could. Another is pressure to reform local zoning. I think this is the biggest thing in terms of like the builder aspect. Like, how can we pressure local municipalities to build more housing? And Realtor.com argues to boost inventory where demand is highest. Some housing advocates are calling on the federal government to take a more active role in local zoning reform. While zoning laws are typically controlled at the city or county level, a national housing emergency could give the White House a platform to encourage local governments to legalize more affordable housing types. First thing I think of here is mobile homes and manufactured homes. A lot of areas, a lot of cities basically try to low-key ban mobile homes and manufactured homes. As a result, manufactured home construction and purchases is down from where it was 40, 50 years ago. We should probably get more mobile and manufactured homes. It is an affordable way for Americans to live. We should also try to ease zoning restrictions with federal support for states and municipalities to allow townhomes, duplexes, and accessory dwelling units could create more affordable options, according to Realtor.com's article. Lowering closing costs is another way. Even first-time home buyers who qualify for a mortgage and have saved enough for a down payment miss out because they don't have enough upfront cash. Closing costs run between 2 and 5%. Is there a way to lower closing costs? Potentially. I mean, realtor fees are the biggest closing cost. So maybe lower mortgage rates. Is there a way to lower mortgage rates? Obviously, Trump and Bill Pulte are pressuring the Fed constantly to lower interest rates. Some people have talked about potentially getting the Fed to buy mortgages again. Some people want Jerome Powell and the Fed to directly intervene in the mortgage market to reduce rates by buying up mortgages. That's something Powell just said that they're not going to do. But historically, you could see that during the peak of the pandemic, the Fed bought up $2.7 trillion worth of mortgages in their MBS program, mortgage-backed security purchase program. This is something that started back after the last crash in 2010, and then it went wild during the pandemic. And since 2022, the Fed has been winding down its mortgage balance sheet. People at the Fed have indicated they don't want to hold any mortgages anymore. And I actually think that's a good idea. I don't think the Federal Reserve should be subsidizing the mortgage market. I think that was a big mistake that the Fed made in the 2010s by buying up all those mortgages. It artificially suppressed mortgage rates to a level that wasn't sustainable. And now, as a result of the Fed unwinding their mortgage balance sheet, mortgage rates are now elevated. And I think that's just something that has to come to pass, has to come to fruition. All right, everyone, let's get some requests from you guys here. What are you thinking about all of this? What do you think about housing policy? What do you think the Trump administration should do? Should they maybe not do anything? Some people are arguing the federal government really doesn't have a place in this. One person is saying removing income tax would do nothing. Companies would just charge more. I think capitalism is the issue here. Yeah, I don't know what removing income tax would do for the housing market. That's also something that we wouldn't be able to afford. We're already running a massive deficit. Someone else says 20 to 30% of workers are now living in vans anyway. I think there has been an uptick in people living in vans in their cars. I don't think it's 20 to 30%. Another user, Victor, is trying to buy a home in mid-2026. First-time home buyer near Atlanta. Is this a good idea? All right, let's take a look at Atlanta, everyone. What's going on in Atlanta's market? And I'm going to go through some of your requests and look at different housing markets here. And I'm going to actually look at through the context of what we're talking about today, like investor activity, home building. So Atlanta is a market where in the last 5 years, housing units have expanded by 4%. So there has been some home building in Atlanta. It's not as much as a market like Nashville or Charlotte, but there is some home building going on in Atlanta. And you can see most of that building is occurring in the suburbs. So Forsyth County, Gwinnett County, Clayton County. And as you go closer to the middle of Atlanta, there's less home building. But the good thing is for you as a buyer in Atlanta is that the values are dropping. Values are down 5% year over year in DeKalb County. They're down 3.7% year over year in Fulton County. They're down 2.7% in Cobb County. And they're down 7.8% in Clayton County. So values in and around Atlanta are dropping. It's becoming more affordable. It's becoming friendlier for you as a home buyer. However, Victor, there's big differences in where this is happening. Let's take a look at the zip codes in Atlanta. We have some zip codes down 13.4%, 14.2% in the last 12 months. These happen to be the zip codes, everyone, with the biggest investor concentration. So there's already investor sell-off happening in south of Atlanta, and this is actually showing what can happen when investors sell and stop buying. Prices can start correcting and correcting quickly. You know, if you want to buy a more affordable house in Atlanta, to the south side, to the southeast side, that's where it's happening. If you go more to northern Atlanta, values are still going up. So it's a very bifurcated market. Like even if you just look at one city like Atlanta, there's massive differences that exist. So this is also, again, supporting the notion of like, hey, we could do federal housing policy, we can do a housing emergency, but like it's going to be a dramatically different impact on different areas depending on how the policies go. All right, what else do we got? One user is saying, figure out a way for existing owners with low mortgage rates to be able to port those mortgages to a new property purchase and create second mortgage that makes up the difference if needed. This is an interesting proposal. Figure out a way for existing mortgage holders with a low rate to port their rate to a new house. That would certainly stimulate sales demand. I don't necessarily think that would stimulate inventory though. And I don't know how that would cause prices to get more affordable. I think that's just like a nice idea for people who lucked out for a cheap mortgage. So you can actually do that. Well, FHA mortgages are assumable. So someone can't port an FA mortgage, but if you buy a house with an existing FHA mortgage, it's assumable. There are some companies that specialize in that. Let's see, what else? We have a Las Vegas recommendation. Now, Las Vegas is a very interesting market, everyone. I feel like Las Vegas is just like constantly at the epicenter of the U.S. housing market, of the U.S. economy. As some of you know, Vegas is experiencing some issues economically. Tourism is down. Hotel bookings are down in Vegas. Home prices in Vegas are now flat year over year, according to data from Zillow, which is available on Reventure App. Reventure App, everyone, this is the program that I invented and that I built to help you as a home buyer and investor better understand the market. Now, big differences going on in Las Vegas. Again, kind of like Atlanta, depending on where you go. Depending on where you go. So we have some areas in Vegas which are already correct. And you can see kind of towards the center of Las Vegas. Center of Las Vegas, Paradise up to North Las Vegas, values are starting to go down. They're still going up in Summerlin to the west. They're still going up in parts of maybe not really Henderson anymore. They're kind of flat to going down in Henderson. Boulder City, they're going up. So it kind of depends on where you go in Vegas as far as the direction of the market. In terms of our 12-month forecast, you can see we now have a negative forecast for most areas in Las Vegas. So it's going to get better for you as a buyer in Vegas over the next year. The inventory is up, the sales volume is down, the prices have started to tilt down, but they're still expensive. But the good news is it's going to get a bit better for you over the next 6 months if you're a buyer in Las Vegas. I think another interesting market to look at, everyone, is Los Angeles. We hear a lot about California in the news, right? What's going on in LA? LA is constantly in the news. What's going on in Los Angeles' housing market? I know I got a lot of you guys out there in California. This is, again, a very bifurcated market, everyone. Super bifurcated. These areas in blue, values are going down in these areas in blue. Downtown LA, Hollywood, Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, and Venice, values are going down, and actually going down by quite a bit, anywhere from 4 to 10% year over year in some of these zip codes. Meanwhile, if you go out to Pasadena, values are still going up. And if you go down to Anaheim and Santa Ana, values are also still going up. So super bifurcated market in Southern California. However, the market overall is starting to tilt down. We're starting to go negative year over year on prices in the LA, Orange County metro area. And again, this just shows you how different the US housing market is, how fragmented it is by neighborhood, how important it is for you guys to access the data for your zip code so you understand what's going on in your market. Let's take some more requests, see what you guys are saying. Oh, here's an interesting question. When should you sell? Before it tips or first year when prices are reducing? This is a great question. Where should you sell? More and more sometimes on these live streams, we're seeing more sellers come in with questions. When should you sell? Well, it totally depends on where you are, everyone. But let me just pick a state, like in Texas. Let's look at Texas and let's look at Reventure's price forecast. We're going to look at Reventure's price forecast in Texas. Well, the perfect time to sell would have been September 2021. That was like the peak seller's market. And if we look at this month by month, you could see even through March 2022, we kind of were a peak seller's market in Texas. You could get a good price for your home. But then, wow, it just fell off the table. It fell off the table and then kind of went below average. Then we went down to a 33 out of 100 on our buyer's market score in Texas. Big buyer's market. It's improved a bit in the last month. Might improve again in September due to the fact that mortgage rates dropped. But I think what this says is like, you definitely missed your window to sell at the peak. Like if you're a seller in Texas, Florida, Arizona, Colorado, I mean, you're not getting a peak price. Like you missed that window. That window closed in 2022. The question is this going to get worse and how much more value is going to drop? Well, we think value is going to drop 5% over the next 12 months in Texas. So if you're a seller, I would encourage you to look at our 12-month price forecast. Minus 4.9% is where our price forecast is. So we think values are going to drop from 300,000 to 285,000 in Texas. So if you want to sell, I would recommend price ahead of the market, right? Anticipate where the market's going. Don't just look at your neighbor, what your neighbor sold it for 3 years ago. Look at that 1-year forecast, price ahead of the market, anticipate the decline if you're truly interested in selling your house and unlocking your equity. I think one of the biggest issues on the housing market right now is a lot of sellers are fearful to sell. They know it's a down market. They know the demand is low. Using this forecast is something that could help you better understand where the value is heading, better understand how to price your home. Oh, we have a question from Lucy. Nick, any news on Airbnb? Yeah, Airbnb, folks, is struggling. Airbnb is struggling. We're seeing just kind of like a slow bleed of people out of the Airbnb market. Let's take a look at what Airbnb's stock price is. Let's see, Airbnb stock price. Where are they at today? 126. That's actually up 8% the last 6 months, down 7% the last year, and down 11% since they IPO'd. So Airbnb, I mean, you can see their stock price just really hasn't done much. in the last year. It's down from where they IPO'd. But like one market that's kind of like a signal, of where Airbnb is heading, folks. I like certain markets have more exposure. Is severe? It's a market actually called Sevierville, Tennessee. Sevierville, Tennessee. Where are we here? Sevierville, Tennessee. Just to the southeast of Knoxville. Now, this is like one of the number one vacation markets in the U.S., Sevierville. So Knoxville's here, Sevierville's here. This is like Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. So, in Gatlinburg as well. Now, the reason we know this is a big Airbnb market, the reason we know this is a big Airbnb market is because if we look at a metric on Reventure App called shadow inventory, you can see 20% of all the homes are seasonally vacant. 20% of all the homes are seasonally vacant. So what's going on with prices here? A lot of people bought into this market over the last 3 or 4 years. Values in Sevierville, they went up 33% in 2021, 25% in 2022, then they dropped 4.6%, dropped 1.3%, and have now dropped 6.5%. So values in Sevierville are down about 12% from peak. Again, this is like the number one Airbnb market, Sevierville, Tennessee. Just like tons and tons of people buying up cabins in the mountains and renting them out short term to people who want to get away in eastern Tennessee. Well, values here are already down about 12%. Reventure thinks they're going to drop 8.9% the next 12 months. Why is that? Take a look at the inventory, folks. Oh my gosh, 2,000 homes on the market for sale in Sevierville, Tennessee, Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg. Folks, 2,000 homes. That's like 2,000 homes. Just to give you like a comparison, that's almost as much as Chattanooga. Like that's almost as much as like parts of California, like big cities in California. So we have a massive Airbnb sell-off going here, and this is just to prove the point to you, Lucy, that the Airbnb market is correcting, and the cities that are most exposed to that Airbnb correction are going down. Values here down 6.5% the last 12 months. Oh, we have a question here. What about a shadow inventory in Orange County, California? Shadow inventory in Orange County, California. So shadow inventory is an interesting thing, folks, and this is a metric that we have on Reventure App, shadow inventory, and it's under investor metrics. So we have a couple metrics here. We have shadow inventory percentage. We also have vacancy rate. You can see, I would actually encourage a lot of you guys to look at the vacancy rate. If you want to just get a sense for like how many homes, could be there to like be sold onto the market in the future. Look at this vacancy rate. The areas in red have the higher vacancy rate, the more shadow inventory. I mean, folks, like look at Western Florida. In Naples, 32% of the houses are vacant. In Cape Coral, 27% of the houses are vacant. In Punta Gorda, 27% of the houses are vacant. This is data from the U.S. Census Bureau. What about prices here? Oh, prices are collapsing on the west coast of Florida. So we have this interesting correlation between vacancy rate and values going down. So that's an interesting point. You might want to look at that vacancy rate for your area. The question, though, was about Orange County. So we're going to switch to County View here on Reventure App. Look at that vacancy rate in Orange County, 5.4%. 5.4% vacancy in Orange County. You can see this is like roughly in line with the long-term average. So I really wouldn't say there's a ton of shadow inventory. However, like this is a sensitive market. And if vacancies were to go up to 6.5%, that could have like a big impact. But in general, it's not like Florida. California has like much lower vacancies than a lot of other parts of the US in general. You can see vacancies are actually really low here in this corridor in the Northeast. Going down from Boston to Hartford to New York, down to Philadelphia, down to Washington, very low vacancy rates. There isn't a lot of building. There aren't a lot of second homes. There aren't as many investor homes here. How are we going to get home prices down in some of these areas here in the Northeast? Well, interestingly, prices actually are going down in some of these areas in the Northeast. A little fun fact, everyone, that almost no one knows on the housing market is that home values in Manhattan are down 20% in the last 3 years. Home values in Manhattan are down 20% already in the last 3 years. Manhattan, one of the biggest housing market corrections in America. Additionally, values in Washington, D.C. are down 12% the last 3 years. So we actually do have a mini correction happening in some of these big Northeast cities, but the suburbs in these Northeast cities are still going up by a lot in some cases. All right. What else, everyone? What are the requests? Someone says the drinking game is to take a shot every time Nick zooms in on Florida. If you add Texas, your liver won't survive. I do actually talk about Florida a lot. I also talk about Texas a lot. Those happen to be the second and third biggest states in the U.S. So it's probably not surprising that I talk about those states in California a lot. Is there some other states you would want me to focus on more? Let me know. Let's see. Lucy says, just not going down enough. That's a good point. Home prices have started to go down in some of these areas. They just aren't going down enough. We have a request here. Space Coast, Florida, 32920. Space Coast, Florida, 32920. Cape Canaveral, everyone. This is where they launched the spaceships, right? Values are down 4.5% in the last year in Cape Canaveral. This is really funny, folks, because this is a market I just remember people telling me, and this is Brevard County, Florida. This is on the East Coast. I just remember like people telling me 3 years ago that this market was going to explode and keep going up. I particularly remember there was like crowdfunding deals, buying up investment properties here. They were just saying this market was going to go up forever. Well, it's going down 4.5% the last 12 months. Our 12-month forecast is minus 6.3% here. You can see values in Cape Canaveral are down 3 years in a row. So we are seeing, actually at this point, it's almost been 10%, the correction. We think it's going to go down another 6% the next 12 months, meaning good time for you to potentially get into the market. It's not to say values won't go down by more, but they've already gone down close to 10%. We think they're going to go down another 6% based on the data at Reventure App. Get in there, negotiate hard with those sellers. I think some of these sellers will be willing to take some discounts given what's happening in the market. Oh, someone wants me to cover Alaska and North Dakota. What do you guys think about Alaska, North Dakota? Someone's also looking to move to Topeka, Kansas. Would love to see Pennsylvania. All right, folks, let's do a little rapid fire round of the states that I do not cover as frequently. Let's do it. North Dakota. Now, folks, North Dakota. Do you know what's up in North Dakota? Not a whole lot. There is a lot of oil, though, up there. A lot of oil fields up there. North Dakota actually has the 5th highest appreciation in America the last 12 months in North Dakota. And our 12-month forecast for North Dakota, we think values are going to go up another 3.6%. So we think values are going to continue to go up in North Dakota over the next year. There's still a shortage of inventory in North Dakota. It's still a seller's market. So I wouldn't wait, really, if I was looking to buy in North Dakota. Of course, it depends on your city and your county, what's going on in your area. But I wouldn't wait, actually, too long to buy in North Dakota. What about Topeka, Kansas, folks? We got a question about Topeka, Kansas. It looked like someone was moving to Topeka from California. Can you verify that? Values in Topeka were up 2.9% the last 12 months. Now, Topeka, folks, $216,000 to buy a house. Very affordable market. The biggest the decline that Topeka has experienced in the last 25 years was 3.7% in 2011. This is a market that did not crash in the last downturn. It is unlikely, I think, to crash again. Our 12-month forecast for Topeka is plus 2.8%. Plus 2.8% in Topeka is our forecast for the next 12 months. So we think this is a market that's going to continue to appreciate. Why? Well, we look at that mortgage payment as a percentage of income. It's only 24%. Home value to income ratio in Topeka, only 2.8. Oh my goodness, 2.8x home value to income ratio. So yeah, we think Topeka is still going to go up. What are some other areas that I haven't covered recently? Well, let's look at Alaska. What's going up in Alaska, everyone? Values in Alaska are up 2.6% in the last 12 months. Now, where would you ever go in Alaska? Well, you could go to Anchorage, or you could go to Juneau, which is the capital. I remember that from elementary school. You could go to this city that I could not pronounce, Ketchikan. Ketchikan values are up 6.4%. You could also go to Fairbanks, but in Fairbanks, values are going down. If we look at the county view here in Alaska, we could see we have a lot of just, like, it looks like unincorporated area. But ultimately, this is an area, Alaska, that we think prices are going to go up actually 3.9% the next 12 months. There's still an inventory shortage in Alaska. So yeah, folks, values are still going to go up in some parts of America. Can we get more home building up in Alaska as well? Maybe. Maybe it needs it. All right, what other requests, everyone? Let's see here. Tornadoes are a concern of mine, says Scott. Yeah, if you're in Kansas, tornadoes should be a concern of yours. Also here in Tennessee, tornadoes are becoming a bigger issue. We have a request for Chattanooga. Victor says our forecast is until August 2026. Tomorrow will be updated for September 2026. How will they look in late 2026 or 2027, in your opinion? Well, it's hard to forecast out further than a year. We are working on a more longer term forecast, but for now, we only really feel comfortable in the 12-month forecast. I would say, though, the 12-month forecast, if you're looking at that, I mean, it should be pretty similar if you look later in 2026. Buying right now, 76008, $1 million house, folks. Okay, let's look at this zip code, 76008. Someone's buying $1 million house. This is Aledo, Texas. So this is west. This is west of Fort Worth. So we got Fort Worth here, we got Dallas here, and we got Aledo, Texas. So someone's buying $1 million house out here. This is looks like a higher home value area, 541,000. And we look at the demographics, median household income here is 169,000. Oh boy. Wealthy area here to the west of Fort Worth. Is it a good idea to buy in this area right now? Well, values are down 1.9% last year here in Aledo, Texas. You could see going back, this is actually 3 years in a row where values have dropped. Values here did not crash in the last downturn. The last 3 years has actually been the biggest correction we have seen in this market. We think values are going to drop another 7.2% over the next 12 months on the west side of Fort Worth. Why is that? Well, if we look at the inventory levels, they are shooting up. Inventory is shooting up through the roof, so more supply, that puts more downward pressure on prices. Ooh, we got a lot of requests. A lot of requests here. Cleveland says there's a lot of home building in Delaware. I didn't know that. Someone else says it depends on the midterms. Midterms are coming in about a year. It's only a year from now, everyone. Midterm elections. Who do you think is going to win midterm elections? You can let me know. Ed Z Realtor asking about Cape Coral, Florida. I'm going to get back to some of these more random markets, smaller markets in a second. But let's go to Cape Coral. Cape Coral was tagged by the Wall Street Journal as being the worst housing market in America over the summer. Values here are down 10% in the last year. Values are down 10% in the last year in Cape Coral. In the last 5 years, they're still up 42%, but they're down 10% in the last year. And in the last 3 years, they're down 13%. So there's definitely a correction playing out here in Cape Coral. Lots of inventory. Demand is down. So in Cape Coral, the home sales are to the lowest level in a decade in Cape Coral. And that type of decline in home sales is really pushing down prices. Our 12-month forecast in Cape Coral is minus 8.3%. So we think this thing could get to minus 20% total in the next 12 months. It's already gone down 13%. We think it could drop another 8%, everyone. So, I mean, that's, hey, if values are going down that much, you might want to get in on some of that action on some of those listings, negotiate hard with the sellers. Ed says it's the lowest buyer demand in 40 years. That's crazy. Someone says it's because of the hurricanes. It's not just the hurricanes. All of Florida actually has really low demand, not just on the West Coast, but also Central Florida, also East Coast of Florida. Victor says, thank you for your help. You're welcome, Victor. Durango, Colorado. Durango, Colorado. This is an interesting one, everyone, because in Durango, now, do you guys know where Durango is? This is on the southwest. Where am I here? Where's Colorado? Here's Colorado. So interestingly, like Denver, prices dropping. Colorado Springs, prices dropping. Boulder, prices dropping. Durango, price is still going up. Durango's like in the very southwest part of the state, borders New Mexico, expensive part of town, a lot of second home people here in Durango. You can see Durango, values have gone up 2012 through now. They haven't dropped year over year in a while. Will they drop? Well, we think values in Durango are going to be flat year over year. There has been more inventory on the market recently in Durango. We're just getting back to that long-term average on inventory. And folks, ultimately what I would recommend you guys do is access this data for yourself. So if I can find here the thing I wanted to show you. I don't know if it's coming up. All right, everyone. So what I would recommend you do, if you're a home buyer who wants to understand where prices are heading and potentially how, this housing emergency, if it happens, could impact your market, go to www.reventure.app and access the data for your city and zip code. This is the program I've been using in this video to help you all understand your local market. The main things I would track, everyone, are the home price forecast. Our home price forecast is a 12-month forecast on where prices are heading in the future. The bluer the area, the more our downward forecast is. The redder the area, the more we think prices are going to go up. Understand that forecast down to your zip code. I would also recommend checking out our overvaluation rate. The over-undervaluation rate is going to help you understand the fundamentals of your local housing market and if now is a good time to buy. The more overvalued your market is, the more in red it will be. But you can see actually there's parts of downtown Nashville that are undervalued now. Incomes have gone up by more than home prices. So if a market becomes undervalued, then it's less likely to crash. It's a better time to buy. If a market's significantly overvalued, then it's riskier to buy, right? There's more of a downside risk. So those are some metrics I would really recommend that you guys check out. You can access that data at www.reventure.app. You can also download our app in the iOS and Android app stores. Make sure to check out the mobile app that we released earlier this year,